Hey guys, and welcome to my YouTube channel. If this is your first time on my channel, you are highly welcome. In this tutorial, I'll be teaching you guys how to make this beautiful underbust corset gathered dress. If this seems like something you're interested in, make it for yourself or for a client, stick with me to the end of this video and let's get started. And yes, do not forget to hit on your subscribe button and put on your post notification to know whenever I post a new tutorial. Now let's get into it. To make this dress, you'll be needing a plain crepe fabric and also an Ankara print, just like you can see in the video. For the crepe fabric, I have about 2 yards, and the Ankara print, I have about 4 yards. I actually wish I have more, but that's all I have. If you have more, please use it because it's going to give you more gathers. Let's now go ahead and draft out the pattern. Now notice that I already went ahead to place my pattern paper on fold here, okay? Now the first thing I'm going to be doing is to come down from the top of my pattern paper by 1/2 inch, just like I'm doing here. And this 1/2 inch is going to serve as my starting line or my shoulder line. And from this shoulder line, you'll be taking out all your vertical measurements. First is your shoulder to your bust point, and mine is 11.5 inch. I'll just mark that there. Then the shoulder to the under bust, mine is 16 inches. Then the shoulder to the waist, I'm using 19 inches. The next measurement is going to be from your shoulder to your hip line. Before marking your hip line measurements, make sure to remove 1.5 inch, okay? You don't want to mark it exactly on the hip line or the bust waist is going to look funny. For me, I have 27 inches. When I remove 1.5, I have 25.5, and I'm just going to mark that here. Now connect all the points you just marked with a straight line. Going over this is my shoulder line, my bust point, my under bust, my waist, and my hip line. For the V-neck line of this dress, come in from the center front by 3 inches, and then from the same point you come down by 8 inches. After doing that, connect these 2 points you just marked using your curve rule. If you don't have a curve rule, you can use a freehand, okay? Now note that you can make your V-neck longer or shorter depending on your preference. The next thing you'll be doing is to divide your shoulder measurement by 2 and mark that on the shoulder line. Come down from that point by 1 inch, and this is going to be serving as our shoulder slope because our shoulder is not straight. Now connect that into the neckline just like this. The next measurement you'll be marking will be from the shoulder slope to the chest line, and you can do this by coming up the bust line by 2 inches or dividing your bust by 6 and adding 1.5 to that. After doing that, what I got was 8.25, so I'm just going to mark that there. Connect the point you just marked with a straight line to the shoulder slope, just like you see me doing here, and then connect it to the side of your pattern paper, just like this. And I'm just going to label that the chest line. From this, you'll be drawing out your armhole curve. To get your armhole curve, divide this line by 2, and you can do that by placing your tape on that line like this and folding your tape into 2. Okay, I'm just going to mark my midpoint here, and from that point you're going to come in by 1/2 inch. Now on the chest line, divide your belt measurements by 4, and whatever you get, you mark that on the chest line. Then you connect these 3 points you just marked with a curve to form your armhole curve, just like you see me doing. If you look closely to the front part of this dress, they are not that. So now we'll just go ahead and mark out our round body measurements. On the bust point, divide your bust measurement by 4 and mark it there. On the waistline, divide your waist measurements by 4 and mark it there. Lastly, on the hip line, divide your hip measurements by 4 and mark it there. Now connect all these points you just marked together using your freehand or your rule, just like you see me doing. Now that you're done with that, the next thing you'll be doing is to draw out the stylish Basque waistline. On the hip line, from the center front, you're going to come in by 5 inches and mark it there. From the same point, you come up by 2.5 inches on the center front and you mark it there. Now connect these 2 points you just marked together using a curve. Now if you have a curve, please make sure to use a curve as it's going to make it easier for you to get a clean curve. But if you do not, you can go ahead and use your free hand and just try and make a clean curve. Can you see we've gotten the first curve, and for the second curve you come up the hip line by 3 inches instead of 2.5. Do not forget 3 inches instead of 2.5. So I'm just going to mark 3 inches there. And I'm also going to connect it with a curve into the 5 inch on the hip line, just like you see me doing. As you can see now, we have our stylish Basque waistline. Now to get the underbust corset or the underbust effect, you have to come up the underbust line by 3 inches. And then you connect these 3 inches you just marked with a curve into the side on the underbust line, just like you see me doing. Do not forget it is to the underbust line. Now we are done with that. Since you're making a gathered dress, just connect what you have on your hip line all the way to the length of your pattern paper. Let's cut out our pattern paper. Please watch carefully to see exactly how I'm cutting this out. I'm just going to open this up so you guys can see what I have. This is what I have, and this is what yours should look like when you are done. As you can see, the Basque waistline is just exactly how it is in the dress we are recreating. Now I'm just going to fold this back in because we are going to be cutting out the underbust, and I'm just going to cut that out. Done with that, you'll be slashing this cup area, because if you look closely to the dress we are recreating, it has gathers on the cup side just around here. So I'm just going to be slashing the upper part into 2. To do that, just divide what you have on the shoulder by 2. Okay, I'm just going to place my tape here and fold it into 2 to get the midpoint, and I'm just going to mark that. And secondly, you divide what you have on the bust area by 2. What I have here is 10, so dividing that by 2 is going to be 5, so I'm just going to mark it there. Now I'm going to connect all these points I just marked with a rule throughout the length of this upper part. Now that you're done with that, you'll be slashing through this line you just marked all the way to the top of the pattern paper, but not entirely, okay, because we just want to spread the bottom part. Now that we are done with this, let's go ahead and cut everything on our fabric. I already went ahead to put my fabric on fold with the lining, and I've given it a good press. Placing my upper pattern paper on the center front, I'm just going to pin it down to keep it in place. Next, you'll be spreading this part of your cup by 2 inches, and this is because the gathers is not much, so you don't need much opening. Just mark 2 inches there and make sure you pin down your pattern paper at that point. Now go ahead and cut this out. Make sure to add 0.5 inch stitching allowance to the down part of your cup while cutting it out, just like you see me doing here. To the side, make sure you add your stitching allowance before you cut it out. Here I'll be using a 1.5 inch stitching allowance, and I'm just going to mark that, connect it together just like I did there, and then cut it out. Add 0.5 inch while cutting the neck, and also 0.5 inch while cutting the shoulder. To the armhole part, you won't be adding any stitching allowance, so just go ahead and trim out the remaining part of your cup. For the underbust area, add 0.5 inch to this part, 1.5 inch to the side, 0.5 inch to this under part, and you won't be adding any stitching allowance to the center front. After cutting out the underbust, this is what it looks like. If you look at the gathered part of this dress, you'll notice that at the waistline, it also has the same curve structure, just like you can see on my pattern paper. I don't think it's straight, so I'm going to be using the remaining part of my pattern paper to draft it out. I'm just going to be slashing and spreading this pattern paper by 2 inches. After doing that, I'll just label from 1 to 7. That's where my pattern paper stopped, and I'll just slash right through each of them, just like you see me doing. I realized number 7 was too tiny, so I'm just going to be labeling this both sides number 6 instead of cutting it into 2. I'm going to be slashing each piece of my pattern paper on this fabric. And also make sure you draw a straight guideline, just like you see me draw here, which you'll be placing your pattern papers on to make sure that they're in a straight line. Right here, I have 2 yards of fabric, okay, and I folded it into 2. We are going to be making gathers, so of course we need enough yards of fabric. Now I already went ahead to measure the width of my fabric, which is 36 inches, right? And I have about 6 pattern papers, so I just divided 36 by 6, and that's going to give me 6. All right, so the space between each of these pattern papers I'll be using here is going to be 6. So for yours, when you measure out the width of your fabric, you divide it by how many pattern papers you have, and then that's the number you'll be using to spread. Also, just make sure that all your pattern papers are spread evenly with the same inches, okay? As you can see, I'm done spreading each of my pattern paper. Now I'm going to be adding ½ inch to the top of this part before cutting it out. This ½ inch is what we'll be using to join to the upper part of our dress, okay, just like you see me doing here. When you come down to this midpoint, make sure you take it in just like the shape of the pattern paper, okay, because you want it to have that same shape that the top has at the back waistline. So you are going to make sure to follow that shape. After you're done with that, just go ahead and cut this out. And as you can see, it has the stylish Basque waist the upper part of the dress has. This is exactly what yours should look like. The next thing you do now is just to determine how long you want your dress to be. This is totally up to you. I want mine to be long, so I'm just going to do that. You just decide the length you want your own dress to be and cut it. I'm just opening this up so you see what the waistline looks like. And also remember that we'll be gathering this. We'll be doing the same thing we did on the front of the dress to the back of the dress. The only difference is the zipper allowance. This is my shoulder line, chest line, bust point, underbust, waistline, and the hip line. Although this underbust line is not necessary for the back piece, but I already have it here, so let's just leave it that way. You can draft yours without the underbust line because it's not necessary for the back piece. Now for the zipper allowance, I used 1.5 inch for my zipper allowance, as you can see on your screen. For the depth of the neckline, I came down by 1.5 inch for the back. You can use a v-neck if you want, because the original dress has v-neck. I added 1 inch to the waistline when I was drafting out this because I wanted to add that, okay? You can make this without the that. It's totally up to you, but I want to add that to mine to give that extra clinched waist effect. My nip to nip divided by 2 is 4, so I'm just going to mark that on the waistline, on the bust line, on the chest line, and also on the hip line. And I'm going to connect this with a straight line all the way across. I'll be coming out on both sides of my waistline by ½ inch. Before connecting this to the chest line, you come down by ½ inch, and then you'll be connecting your dart to that ½ inch you came down by, just like this. On the waistline, you come down by roughly about 2 to 3 inches and connect it back into the dart. Draw your back waistline just like you did in front. From the center back, after the zipper allowance, you mark 5 inch, and from the same point, you go up by 2.5 inch. Connect these 2 points with a curve. Also, make sure to extend this curve into the zipper allowance just like this, okay? Now, on the other side of the hip line, you are going to come up by 3 inches, and then you are going to connect this with a curve into the 5 inch on the hip line. Now that we are done with this, the next thing we'll be doing is to work on our zipper, because we want this to give a snatched waist and also to remove any form of bulge at the zipper, coming on the waistline by 1 inch, okay? And from this 1 inch, using your rule, you are going to connect it into the upper part of your back pattern paper, just like you see me doing here. And also from that 1 inch, connect it back into the hip line just like this. I'll just be shading this part that you'll be cutting out. Also on the waistline after the zipper allowance, coming by 0.5 inch and connect this back into the upper part of the back bodies and back into the hip line, just like you see me doing here. So these 2 new lines we just drew now is going to be our new zipper allowance, okay? These 2 new lines we just drew, this is our new zipper allowance. This is going to help to give you a snatched waistline. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut out my pattern paper. Here I'm just extending my zipper allowance to the gathered part of the dress. Now let's cut out the back pieces of our dress on the fabric. I'm done cutting it out, and for the back part, the zipper, I didn't add any allowance. I added ½ inch to the down part and 1.5 to the side, none to the armhole, 0.5 to the shoulder and to the neckline. Okay, this is the 2 pieces of my back piece with the lining. Now I've also gone ahead to cut out the gathered part of my back piece the same way I did for the front piece. Okay, the only difference is that this one is open because there's a zipper allowance at the back. We have come to the end of this tutorial, and in the next tutorial I'll be showing you guys how to go about joining this dress together. Okay, do not forget to hit on that subscribe button to turn on your post notification to know when I post the next tutorial, and also make sure to share this to family and friends who you think would need this. See you guys in my next tutorial.